We're supposed to go to a restaurant on Fridays.
We could still go to a restaurant.
It's not too late?
Not for us King sisters. Where do you want to eat?
Pizza! Or spaghetti.
To start off, I'd love to know how you first got into acting and what made you take the jump to doing it professionally.
As a child, I was pretty solitary and, being autistic and non-speaking until I was like 4 years old, I found other ways to express myself creatively. And in my soul, I think I was always a storyteller. I would film everything on this little flip video camera. And once I started speaking, I would talk constantly into these little Panasonic voice recorders. I was recording life and my experiences so I could go back later and revisit it whenever I wanted. But eventually I was confronted with middle school and high school and the need to interact with more with other humans. And that's that's when I started acting. It was at first a way to learn to interact with people more appropriately, through like learning improv techniques. But then I fell in love with it. Back then I didn't really know, the possibilities that existed for me. I just wanted to create and tell stories. But then after high school, I went to film school, and there I was able to start polishing my storytelling skills. And I think that was the jump, actually, when I moved to LA and just, jumped right in. I came here for an internship as a video editor for a few months, but at the same time, I was getting headshots, finding an acting coach, and working background and doing commercials. And then finally, I got onto an agent's roster and booked my first, significant role, which was on the Netflix series Atypical. And that was my jump into television. I booked that role and, I got to authentically play an autistic character for the first time.
Tell me about your audition for the Pitt. What was that process?
Well, I think it was kind of normal process-wise, the audition came to me through my agent, and I had to self-tape the audition and, send it to casting. And I'm sure they auditioned like many autistic and neurodiverse actors. And the scene didn't give away much about the character other than showing very clearly the strength of the relationship between Becca and Mel. But one interesting thing physically about the audition was that I had to do the initial self-tape while I was out of town. I think I was in New York, but I had to do the audition in the hotel room. It was like a whole thing. I had to figure out lighting, and I didn't have a tripod for my phone, so I had to stack a bunch of stuff up and bounce on top. It was a lot.
Yeah.
When I was working on the audition, I remember feeling that there was something different about the scene and about Mel and Becca's relationship in how it was written. And, I remember being really, really excited about that.
Tell me a little bit about what makes the Pitt different from anything else you've worked on.
There's a lot of differences. First of all, the type of show is very different. In the past, I've done mainly dramedies, and the subject matter in the Pitt is very, very serious. And secondly, the way the show is shot is very different. It's so cool to be in these scenes, and I'm fascinated with how the crew works, constantly moving and on that amazing set. And physically, it's so much fun because you really feel immersed in the scene, but there's other things, important things like the storyline, the subject matter, which are very real and honest, but also portrayed authentically on screen. And those things are a priority for the show. The authenticity and truth of the stories is 100% not up for interpretation, and that is definitely different than most projects. As a marginalized person working as an actor and cast mostly as disabled characters, I don't always experience that. Another difference between the Pit and other projects I've worked on is the popularity of the show. I mean, every show has fans, but Pit fans are like another level of fandom.
Yes.
They're amazing and dedicated, and I love how excited they are about the details in the show and how openly supportive they are of all the characters really and their stories. They're like the best. Honestly, I love them. They really do relate to Mel and Becca's relationship.
As a fan myself, like I said, Becca and Mel are two of my favorite characters. I didn't know until reading recently, am I right, that they are twin sisters?
Yes, they are twin sisters.
Wow. I'm a twin myself, and I thought that was really interesting, and it made me love the characters even more. Tell me about working with Taylor to establish the chemistry and make it feel authentic that the two of you are sisters.
We really didn't have to work on that. I mean, not formally or anything. Taylor is just super easy to get along with. She also seems to understand me, and she's smart and knowledgeable at her job, just like Mel is with hers. And so she naturally feels like a sister to me. The environment on set is super positive, and everyone is like happy to be there and is so good at their job that it seems like everyone's relationship with each other on set is something that doesn't have to be worked on. I think when we first met, one of the things that helped was that Taylor really put me at ease. She cracks a lot of jokes and she's hysterical. And in season 1, when I was new to the show, I didn't know everyone, and I was focused on my work and being professional because I just really wanted to do a good job. But Taylor was really good at helping me relax, and I think that was what really set the chemistry and the relationship between Mel and Becca.
Becca's role has expanded quite a bit in season 2, which was great because we got to see
Yes.
more of her independent personality, and I think it went in a different direction than anybody was really expecting.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. As the series moves forward, what kind of storylines would you like to see explored with Becca?
Oh, I'm not a writer, let's be clear. But of course, I've imagined all kinds of wacky scenarios for Becca to wind up in the pit again. Like, I don't know, car accidents or a gas explosion at her day facility, because I'd really love to work with the special effects, makeup, and props team. I'm a huge horror fan, so I fantasize about that all the time. But also, from the perspective of my lived experience as an autistic adult, there are things that I like to see shown as real issues for autistic people. A huge one is the lack of employment opportunities for autistic adults. I love to see Becca continue to push her independence and want to find, fulfilling work in her life, but also show how, difficult it is for autistic people to find gainful employment, even with appropriate training and education. I love Becca to have an awesome skill like writing or drawing or online research. Something she could definitely have a job doing and be excellent at, but also having zero resources to help her navigate how to turn that skill and interest into a paid job. Another issue is with supports, such as Social Security benefits and Medicaid, Medicare benefits that are, currently becoming dependent on employment. For we autistics and other disabled people, this is a very real problem because as a whole, we have difficulty finding employment. And, if now our healthcare and other support services are going to be dependent on having a job, a lot of us literally won't survive. I think the current statistic is something like only about 14% to 22% of autistic adults who are capable of working currently hold paying and competitive jobs. So in the show, um, I don't know how Mel is paying for the support she's put in place for Becca, but I imagine that much of it is through like government assistance programs for disabled adults. And if Mel, who's a doctor, is using Medicare to help her with supporting Becca, and that's taken away, then, where does that leave Mel if she now has to make the choice of leaving Becca home alone without support for 15 hours a day, or paying out of pocket for those services, or bringing her to work with her? You know,
Yeah.
none of those options are reasonable in their case. And these are like real problems that real Americans with disabled family members are facing right now.
Absolutely. I love that answer because that's so important and so true. One of the reasons that your character means so much to me is that I do have several nieces and nephews on the autism spectrum, and representation for neurodivergent people, honest, like you said, honest and authentic representation. It's improved, but there's still a long way to go
Right.
when it comes to authenticity. What does excuse me, meaningful representation look like to you, and how do you think that the entertainment industry can improve that representation?
You know, I agree it has improved, but like you said, we have a long way to go. For representation to truly be meaningful, I think that what we see on screen has to reflect, what we see in the world. There's such a wide spectrum of like stories and perspectives within the autistic community. And the only way to give a voice to those who haven't been represented is just to tell those stories. We need to see autistic characters who represent the community beyond the typical stereotypes, like, more autistic characters of color and adults diagnosed late in life who are non-binary or married with children. We also need to see non-speaking autistic people and those who are completely dependent on a caretaker. I mean, we sometimes do see those characters, but it's always from the perspective of the caretaker, and the story is usually about the toll that takes on them and the responsibility of taking care of someone who is incapable of independence of any kind. I just want to see the story told from the perspective of the dependent autistic character. I guess I'm just tired of seeing autism portrayed from the two extremes. Either the character is completely incapable or, they're a savant. That's
Yeah,
why I appreciate how Dr. King is written in the show. She's incredibly capable, but yet she struggles so much at the same time. Becca also has high support needs, but she's shown that, she's capable of making decisions about her own life and also to stand up for herself. And I think this type of character is closer to the truth.
definitely. I think so. Now, I'm not trying to get overly political with this question, and you can feel free if there's anything you're uncomfortable about and don't want to answer.
It's hard not to be political.
It is. So I, as I mentioned with especially with my nieces and nephews, I get very frustrated by how much information about autism there is still out there, and how much people believe, especially when we have influential voices in our government, in the uh like
Right,
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying things that just are stereotypes and mischaracterize
right.
the community. And like I love what you said about how difficult it is for people who are on the spectrum, who are capable of working, to find jobs, because there are more, the problem is more lack of jobs than lack of ability to work.
Yes.
One thing I really appreciate about the Pit is that it's so committed to authenticity, empathy, and truth. Do you think that this is an especially important time for accurate representation of autism? And what do you hope that your performance as Becca can contribute to that conversation?
Um, I I don't know really if this is like the moment where autism representation turns the corner and becomes accurate. I mean, that would be awesome, but I don't think we're there. And, since there are like so many lies and misinformation about everything out in the world right now, it seems unlikely that there'd be a turning point now. I mean, that's how it feels anyway.
Mhm.
But what I do think is that what we have going for us right now is that the Pit has a huge platform to start that momentum. And, because the show is committed to absolute authenticity, the story, the stories and perspective the show is able to work into each 15-hour shift is likely to at least move the needle and move it truthfully and accurately. So, all of that is good. As far as Becca goes, I'm just grateful to have been able to be involved in that authentic message. And, the bodily autonomy storyline in season 2 was an important one. You know,
Very.
every disabled fan of the show, and there's a lot of them, let out this like collective roar when they first realized where Becca's storyline was going.
Yeah.
Because this challenge has been an ongoing battle for all disabled people in their lives. So, with that one storyline, this show was able to not only call attention to the fact that um everyone has the right to be part of making decisions about their own bodies, but also at the same time make millions of disabled adults feel seen and heard. It was such a great storyline, and so I really couldn't have hoped to be part of something more impactful than that. It was a gift to be part of that. And I know that the show and its writers are going to continue to put those truths out there and, represent autism and neurodiversity through like Becca and Mel. So I guess we can only hope. I mean, 10 million viewers is like a pretty big conversation.
Definitely is. And finally, one last question for you, and I'm sure that you get asked this one a lot.
Can we still watch a movie?
It is Friday, isn't it?
Elf!
Yeah. We could do Elf. Or we could see a movie that we've never seen before.
But Elf is so funny!
Yeah.
I'm curious if you like Elf too, or if you've even seen it.
Yes, I've seen it a couple times. Yes. So, yeah, I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, it's great. I would love to see some sort of cameo on the show to do with Elf,
Yeah,
because Elf keeps coming up so much.
right.
I've seen Elf 164 times. Becca loves Elf, so we watch Elf.